Hey, what's up guys? In this video, we're gonna be taking the first look at Aurora HDR 19, a software for HDR photography or photography that you use for bracketing, and specifically how it can be used for your landscape photography, the good, what can be improved, and the overall feel of how you can use it to up your photo game. Right after this. Hey, what's up guys, and welcome into the video. On this channel, we talk landscape photography. So if you're into landscape photography at all or outdoor photography, consider subscribing to this channel. Now in this video specifically, we're talking Aurora HDR 19, the first look at this software that you can really take a look at and see if it could be beneficial for your landscape photography. Now, there are a lot of types of photography that HDR goes into, and I really think HDR over the years has gotten a really bad rap. HDR is not a bad thing. I mean, the first thing you think of, at least for me, when you think of HDR photography, is like those completely overdone photos with ghosting all over the edges. That was like the craze way back, but that fad has passed. HDR photography, and specifically even like bracketing exposures when you're out in the field, is a huge part of landscape photography. You're taking these brackets, these different exposure photos, to really pull in so much dynamic range in your landscape photography, and it really gives you way more detail in some of the shots that you're taking in some of those low light situations, or some of those situations where you have a lot of shadow detail and also a lot of highlight detail. So what I want to do is jump right into Aurora HDR 19 on my computer screen so we can really look at the overall feel, what it is, how it looks, what they've improved, and the overall feel of this software. So the first general feel that you really get about this software is that it's very organized, user-friendly, easy to use. You see down here on the computer screen, they have a learning center for Aurora HDR. If you're new to the program, they have a user guide that you can use to get detailed description of what each tool is. And also gives you a ton of HDR specific options and opportunities to improve your photos that other softwares don't really give you. This is like all HDR specific to give you the best option for success for your photos. So all I'm gonna do is go to Open Image, and I wanna give you like a general overview of what you can do with this software. And I have 3 bracketed photos that I'm gonna pull in that I shot from the field in Ireland. I'm just gonna hit open with those. And what Aurora HDR 19 is gonna do is gonna pick out which ones were shot underexposed, normally exposed, and then overexposed, because taking those brackets at different exposures is how you pull in those details in your shadows and in your highlights. So it's already sectioned out which one was one stop below, which one was properly exposed, and then which one was overexposed. And you can see the different detail options here. A lot of sky detail in the underexposed. Normally exposed, you have a lot of mountain detail and a lot of these shadow details, and then overexposed, you have even more foreground details that are coming through. You have an option down here that's auto alignment. You can select that if you're worried about your photograph being misaligned. Maybe you bumped your camera in the field and you're worried about that alignment showing up. You can auto align with that as well. I'm just gonna go ahead and hit Create HDR. I know mine was aligned properly in the field, bracketing these exposures out. And this is one of the cool features that's new in Aurora HDR 19 is the overall HDR generator. It pulls in so much detail within your photo. Let's go to this computer screen right now and really see how much detail this pulled in. I mean, if you think about what we just saw with those different exposures, and I can do compare right here, this is a general feel of how much detail it actually pulled in from one of the exposures that we can see, and how much sky detail and foreground detail it actually pulled in. So what I want to show you right now, you have the basic filters option or slider options. I always like to do collapse all for this. It just gives me a basic idea for what I want to do with each part of this photo. So I can go to Hdr Basic to start out, and we can start working with this photo and seeing what we can actually do. I might warm it up just a little bit. The HDR merge made it a little bit cold, but also, like, what I like to start out with in a lot of these after doing some of the basic tweaks is selecting a preset or look from this bottom section down here. And since this is a landscape and we're working with landscapes, I can just click Enhance Landscape, and it's gonna give me options of what that would look like on the screen. I mean, you can select bright landscape, you can do all these different types. I'm gonna go ahead and keep it on Enhanced, and I'm gonna pull down that feature just a little bit because I don't want a whole lot of detail coming through. Like, pulled up all the way is a little too much clarity for me. It's just personal preference here when you're dealing with this filtering amount. So you can see that we've improved it a little bit more. Now you can also see that this preset put in some different options for us. It's pulled up our shadows quite a bit, and it's pulled up our contrast some. It's given some more saturation, and actually lowered the vibrance. For presets, what they are is basically a starting point for you as a photographer, giving you a starting point that you can make your tweaks with the software to really complement your style. It's not a final step, it's a first step in you understanding what this preset can do and how you can work with it to benefit your own photography. So what I want to do with this preset specifically is bring in some more contrast, because I really like a lot of like the cloud shadows back here in the back mountains. So I'm going to pull my contrast up quite a bit. And then I'm also going to pull up vibrance. What people are confused about with saturations and vibrance is that vibrance can really pull out greens and blues in your photography. And I have a lot of greens, some little spotty blues showing up in the sky too. So I'm going to pull up vibrance a lot. And then pull up saturations just a little bit as well. So once I'm done with that, I'm just gonna collapse these down. I can go to Filters, Collapse All. And another new feature that I really wanna show you is the HDR Enhance. Now, this will give you like more clarity, smart structure, microstructure, and these are basically just like options for you to create detail within the HDR merge, and it pulls out different parts of each of the exposures to create more detail in those photos. I like to keep mine looking a little bit soft instead of finding a lot of hard edges in those. So I like to pull these down just a little bit. Then you also get Hdr D Noise. If you have a lot of noise in your photos, you can use Hdr D Noise too. And then another new feature is LUT mapping. And LUT mapping is basically like you have all of these LUTs that you can choose from. They're basically like additional filters that I can see. So you can either increase the LUT that you've chosen or decrease that, whatever you want to do. And it's a pretty cool feature that you can use if you don't want to use presets or looks, as they call them in Aurora HDR 19, you can use LUT mapping instead. Now, I want to share with you the detail boost too. The detail boost is a really cool feature because it gives you different options. You can do small, medium, or large detail boost, and it just makes like little edges on things pop a little bit more. Like, it makes it a little bit more grainy and a little bit more stark. I think this would be really good when you're using rocks and jagged features. We don't really have that in this photo, but keep that in mind when you're using this software. If you have like rocks in the foreground, you can use this with. I'm just gonna pull up the small slider a little bit for this photo to really bring out some small details within this photograph and this HDR merge. So I'm gonna collapse that one too. Now, I wanna show you my favorite feature that they've added to Aurora HDR 19. 100%, I think this is a total game changer, and it's the adjustable gradient. Now, I love this because a lot of times when you do an HDR merge, sometimes you merge it and you're like, the sky's a little bit too bright or the foreground's a little bit too dark. I wanna pull that back some. And to originally do that, you may have to export that into like Photoshop and do a whole masking situation. With this, it allows you to do that with a gradient filter that's already built into the merge. So I don't have anything turned on right now. I can select either top or bottom with this, and let's say my sky is a little bit bright. I want it to be darkened up just a little bit. I can decrease my exposure since I'm selected on my top gradient filter. I can decrease that exposure down just a little bit, and increase my contrast. And then they also added in highlights and shadow sliders in this as well. So I can create even more contrast within this gradient filter, and then even increase some vibrance too, because I had a lot of blues coming through in the sky. And that really helps my photograph a lot. I can turn this off and on with this little eyeball icon right here, and you can just see that that increased the detail in the sky and the mountains just enough to make those pop out. Now, I love these things about Aurora HDR 19. Some of the things that I really didn't like too much, like LUTs are cool, but they're kind of like presets or looks as well. They probably could have been pushed into the looks or presets options that you can select and add into that as well. And another thing that I really wish it had was a before and after look for each exposure. Now, on the screen, you can choose the before and after look and have a slider that goes from before and after for one of your exposures that we're doing right here. But I want to see each exposure. If there was a way to create each bracketed exposure that shows up on maybe one in the middle, one on the left, one on the right, I think that would be a lot easier for you to see the impact that the merge has actually made and some of the things that you might want to pull in, like within the small details of the HDR detail boost, within other features of the HDR merge. I think that would really help with Aurora HDR in the next step that they evolve into. So obviously I just talked about the before and after slider, and just showing you that slider right now, you can see how much better this image actually is using HDR. And the amazing thing is we don't have that ghosting. We don't have that crazy artificial HDR look. We have a realistic photograph that we've presented using an HDR merge technology that maybe you didn't know you could do before. Maybe you didn't know you could do realistic HDRs before, but with this software, you can actually achieve that. And I know I've used Lightroom in the past with HDR merge and then editing in Lightroom itself, but this software with this merge gives you way more detail options that are HDR specific. That makes the process so much simpler. It makes the process so much better for the end result of your photography because you have HDR specific detail controls you can use that Lightroom doesn't have, that you may have used to throw it into Photoshop, where this does have a Photoshop plugin. You can do basically everything right here in Aurora HDR 19. So is this comparable to Lightroom in their HDR merge? Absolutely not. And that may surprise you, but that's because this is way above that. It surpasses Lightroom. It's not comparable because it's better than Lightroom. It gives you more HDR power. It gives you more bracketing options to merge your photos together. So it's not comparable because it's better. It's actually better than that Lightroom HDR merge. So overall, there's really a reason why Aurora HDR 19 is a leader in the industry of HDR merging, and more photographers are really starting to switch over to this because it gives them more power. I know a lot of photographers who used this in the past, and it was good to get a good first look at some of the new features that Aurora HDR 19 has for photographers, and specifically landscape photographers, to help you make those high detail, high dynamic range shots really come to fruition from your imagination and from your creativity. So I really and highly suggest this software. If you do a lot of bracketing, if you don't do bracketing, I recommend you probably should start and learn how to do it so you can get more detail out of your landscape photography, because this software is so beneficial to any landscape photographer who likes to shoot in those high dynamic range situations of sunrise, sunset, and other different types of high dynamic range opportunities. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you want to learn more about Aurora HDR 19, you can click in the link below in the video description. If you like this video at all, hit the thumbs up, or consider subscribing to this channel, because we're throwing out videos like this all the time that are designed to help you become a better photographer and open your eyes to new opportunities to where you can post-process your images a little bit differently, in-field techniques, and all that sort of stuff. So thanks so much, guys. I'll see you guys in the next video.